You're going to hear from someone who actually is personally affected by this bill coming in. So it's not a theoretical discussion I'll be giving today. The TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Law application, the design there is an admirable design. It's there to keep the people safe. And I think nothing bad can be said about that. The question does arise, however, of how precisely do you keep people safe? For example, I could say there's a terrible death toll due to cars. Let's ban cars. And that would certainly reduce the deaths by about 3,000 a year in Australia. A very good idea. And certainly walking is better for your health. And so the blood pressure would come down, weight would come down, and there'd be a very good, I think, medical result from banning cars. You'd also be living closer to home. And you'd then not have so much travel to do, so the local economy would improve. So the unintended consequences of banning cars would actually be quite a good improvement in the quality of life, although we wouldn't be able to visit mother-in-law quite so often, which may not be a bad thing itself, but does restrict your choices. Now, the same is true, I think, of all aspects of government regulation. We've got to find this fine balance between protecting the people and allowing some freedom of choice. A simple example can be given, this young boy who fell 10 metres and was rescued very adequately, but he could have been killed falling from a cliff doing a hobby, an activity that he enjoyed. There's risks involved in things. What we should not be tolerating is risks which are due to aberrant behaviour, faulty actions, poor manufacturing, the idea of, say, batteries exploding in the lithium batteries exploding in the electric scooters. That needs to be addressed, perhaps, to keep people safe and houses safe. So we need some kind of regulatory supervision to ensure that what we are purchasing is actually valid, is safe for general consumption. And that, indeed, is what the TGA does. Now, in this particular case, the intent of the law is to add to the current regulations of the current legislation the severe restricting of all vaping goods. And the reason for that has been given as protecting the public from the evils of e-cigarettes. Now, let's leave for one moment the concept of the different vape apparatus which might be purchased. And we'll look here at what actually is facing us. Because we absolutely know that smoking tobacco is a very dangerous, although slow-acting poison. And I have had the misfortune of seeing patients dying a very unpleasant death. In fact, the death of my own parents due to smoking, one at an early age, one at an advanced age, but quality of life and length of life had definitely been very negatively impacted. And I would be one of the first to say, as a rabid anti-smoker, that we ought to be banning smoking altogether. I think there's probably the majority of our population would agree that smoking should not be allowed. On the other hand, there are those for whom smoking is actually a very important part of their lives. And the question could then be raised, is it right to restrict someone's choices, even though they're stupid or obnoxious to other people, because we're restricting the freedom of choice to make a bad choice? I recall very vividly a time I made a bad choice in my life when I was actually in Nepal, and the group of children was unwell at 4,500 metres, and they went back down as I followed the healthy children. And unfortunately, I lost my way in the boulder field, and I saw the summit in front of me, well, above me actually, so I did a snow-face climb, a rock climb, and traversed waist-deep in snow to the summit. And I recall vividly having a rest, my leg dangling free at 5,000 metres, as the guide below was frantically calling me to come down. Coming down would have been more dangerous, I might add, but he didn't like me at all, hanging up there, not roped on, unaccompanied. And I suppose you could say hypoxemia had resulted in my making a poor decision, but it was a lot of fun. And at the top of the mountain, I did recover 2 children who come the easy way and were facing death due to dehydration and exhaustion, and had to kick them off the mountain. So you can see the benefits of actually having a choice, but also the risks of having a choice. Here, however, when it comes to vaping, the paper I tabled some last year or the year before, which showed indubitably that if you allowed vaping to progress sensibly and with healthy ingredients, you would save around about 200 West Australian lives a year. And that seems to be fairly important, because if we don't do that, then we're saying basically 200 lives can just go, be shortened, quality of life be reduced. Because the ease of access to tobacco is actually very evident. And the question then arises, why would you want to ban the vaping? And I'm told that the reason is because of the horrible noxious chemicals which can cause horrible lung disease and death. And you see these pictures of people in intensive care dying horrible deaths due to lung disease. And I quite agree with that opinion. Then, however, when you look closer at the science and you realize what's actually happening is that people are having access to quite toxic ingredients from imported vapes from China, where the 5 milligrams of nicotine now becomes 50 or 60, highly addictive. And then with additives to that vape fluid, which are toxic and should in no way come in contact with young lungs, or indeed old lungs. And you think this must be banned, and rightly so, because it is toxic. It addicts young children, and it's entirely bad. And therefore, you could see why you'd want to actually severely restrict that as an import. Then it doesn't quite make sense why the regulated, safer, provably safer vapes, allegedly 95% safer than tobacco, should be made so difficult to access. I've yet to find the answer for that, because the international evidence is such that vaping should be permitted. In fact, I recall speaking with Burkhard Blinert, the EU and UN head of the German Office for Drug Alcohol Control, who then stated very unequivocally that the reason for this was to keep children safe. Let me say that again. Vaping in Germany is permitted to keep children safe, provided, of course, you use safe vapes, ones which are regulated, one which the government has control over, where the liquids in those vapes are actually safe for health, at least a lot safer than tobacco. Now, I agree with the concept that exposing children to this and puffing out streams of smoke for a 12-year-old is not a clever thing to do at all. Which is why the vape shops assured me when I was visiting them that there's very strict protocols in place that access for children is actually banned, and that they're kept safe because only adults can attend, and that the liquids they use are safe and regulated, and low levels of nicotine, which allow people, and this is the intent, allow people to come off that noxious habit of smoking. And the success rates are actually, if you look at the research, the success rates of using e-vapes to come off tobacco are much, much higher than what I normally prescribe in my clinic. Now, I have, in my time as a doctor in clinic, prescribed quite a lot of medications for helping people to come off smoking. And I've always told these people that by far the more successful rates come from those who just choose not to smoke. Because what I'm prescribing you doesn't actually work. When it comes to the vapes, however, I can absolutely and categorically assure my patient that the chances of coming off tobacco are much higher. This is a proven help for smokers. And anything which makes that more difficult is not in the best interests of the patient. And that's an evident fact, which is why, probably, the government has allowed the prescription by doctors only of vape fluids and certain apparatus. However, there is also the law of unintended consequences. Where there is a ban, a prohibition, there is always a black market. And where there's a black market, there is always a demand for police to actually monitor that black market. And I'm not aware at the moment of any huge increase in police reinforcements, but I understand that the policing levels in WA, at least, are not as high as they might be. Therefore, what we are going to see is shops which no longer can supply the healthier vape options, and the exposure of youngsters to get someone to walk into a shop and buy tobacco and start them down that path of making them addicted to tobacco. If you look at New Zealand, who have taken an opposite view to Australia and have permitted vapes, you will see very clearly the statistics which show that smoking rates have fallen while vaping rates have increased, and that the health of the population, by definition, must therefore be improving. Also, the sensible law they've got there about restricting tobacco sales based on a date of birth and increasing so that the children now will never be exposed to the right to have tobacco. And I, as a rabid anti-smoker and a rabid supporter of wellness, heartily welcome that. So the question then arises, why is it we have taken steps here to make it more difficult to access vapes? Which by definition must then mean that it's easier to access tobacco, which by definition means that it's easier to get people hooked on tobacco, the old-fashioned product, something which is antithetical to everything I hold dear. And we have here, people might say, by the way, that, that we could price them out with the tax. Law of unintended consequences states what? That there will be a black market supplying tobacco to people who are addicted to smoking. And what are we seeing? We are seeing a black market for tobacco. So by pricing it such that it's unaffordable for people, they're going to seek alternatives to achieving their aim. An unhealthy aim, but an aim which they have nonetheless. I regret it, I oppose it, but it is there and it must be recognised. So my argument would be that our government, we ought to be actually helping our patients to get healthier, to make better choices. And so this machine here, this is actually a vape, which is now not TGA approved, of course, not illegal. It's unopened, so I'm quite safe with that, I'm sure. But this would help someone come off tobacco with good support from specialists in the vape shops. It would not be accessible to an under 18. I might argue it should be under 23 or 25, because by then the brain finally seems to mature. But 18 seems to be the current age we take. But my aim would be 23 or 25. Now, so that's been banned, and we're not going to have access to that, except for that which the TGA approves. Now, I'm probably the only person here who has actually prescribed nicotine vapes. And I can tell you that it is not easy. It is not easy. First of all, to find the doctor willing to prescribe nicotine vape. And secondly, to get the vape actually supplied. Not easy. It is very easy to walk into a shop and buy tobacco. You can do it in Woolworths and Coles. So what we've done is we have reduced the availability from specialist shops, we've made it more difficult to prescribe, and we have encouraged people to walk in to satisfy their urges to buy something which is definitely toxic. I would put it to this Parliament that we have actually enabled a worsening of the wellness of our people. And that surely is not something we can be proud of. Then we have something like this. This actually is a dried herb vape, which is used for a number of things, including cannabis. This, I can assure you, is not TGA approved. The Mighty Medic is approved. The Volcano is approved. There's another one, Medilab, I think, a pod inhaler. The third. So when I prescribe cannabis to someone, they're not actually able to purchase the vape to use the cannabis, at least not easily. And that results in taking what action? What action would a sensible person do who's got a dried herb and no way of actually consuming it by a vape? Of course, they're going to smoke it. The worst way of consuming cannabis there is, and I would bitterly oppose that. In my clinic on a regular basis, I'm suggesting very strongly people do not do that. But we have a government here which sees fit to make it more difficult to access the vapes, which allow people to use a product sensibly and safely. And I would put it to the Parliament, this is not the best use of Parliament's time, nor indeed of the TGA. This vape here costs $350. The Mighty Medic, which is actually the Storz and Bickel, Storz and Bickel, a nice German company from America, makes a very good, highly recommended vape. Goes down to 120 degrees, up to 220, which means I can get the cannabis coming through at certain temperatures, and they can go through that range before it gets to combustion. At the combustion level, you lose half of the product in combustion, and also the terpenes there will get destroyed as well. So you're actually getting less of a quality, and using more of it is costing more money. The vape itself will allow people to go through a range of temperatures and absorb the actual oils. You might be saying, this is a terrible thing to do in the first place. And I would give you an example of vaping. The next time you make a curry, hopefully with real herbs and spices, not the powder. The powder, unless you make it yourself, is not good. Once you've got your spices together, you put them into the pan, hopefully with your onions and a bit of salt and pepper, and then it waits a little while. As it heats up, the smell becomes released. What you have now done is you have, at a certain temperature, released the oils within those spices. That, colleagues, that is vaping the spices. You have now technically vaped a spice. If you combust that spice in the curry, you get a very bitter curry. It's not worth eating. You have to do it at the right temperature. The same is true for inhaling cannabis. Now, I mentioned this costs $350 and a very good vape. The Mighty Medic is $500. The Mighty Medic goes down to 120 degrees. This one here goes down to 50 degrees, so I can have a larger range of temperature. This is actually better than the Mighty Medic, but it is not approved. Who judges these things? In every respect, this is actually a better, a safer vape to use, but it is not approved. So first of all, we have a restriction, and secondly, we have a restriction to tools which are not as good as those which are available elsewhere. And we justify that by saying, members, it has been approved by a governmental body, therefore take it or leave it. The choice that people have is being limited. So we have, first of all, the choice to make use of healthy or healthier approaches to coming off tobacco has been greatly curtailed. And the choice we've got for actually the prescription of cannabis for medical use has been curtailed. And the evidence is, and I know it's from personal experience from my patients, the evidence is that the wellness that patients can expect is less than before. And we're about to pass a law which makes it uniform that WA can now join the Commonwealth in offering less wellness to our patients. And I'm sad. I'm sad that we are in the position of passing such a law with best of intent. I do not doubt the good intent. What I doubt is the outcome. By passing laws which reduce access to wellness, we are, in fact, harming our population. That's not why we are here. That's not why this law should be passed. So I know it's futile. I know it's going to get passed. But I need to make this point very clearly that the law as it is passing just now is not serving the people.